We hope this video will assist you as you begin to prepare your grant.
First, let me say this is the 12th year of the Education Foundation, and when I look back, I'm just so pleased at the lives of how many kids and also how many teachers we have impacted, and we'd like to see this continue to grow.
Please start with the needs that are in your classroom. Look at an area or a problem to address. Maybe you want to improve reading fluency, you're wanting to look at math manipulatives. Whatever it may be, start with the needs of the students in the classroom.
Well, I think we start out with what we want teachers to do is we want them to kind of dream a little bit, to kind of think beyond what, the minimum and beyond the box there. But realize in the idea that there are certain needs, because every teacher in every grade level is going to have, as we just talked about, that curriculum they have to follow, what they have to teach, what those students have to come out learning and knowing. And so they go from that sort of dream of this to the reality of what do I need to teach those skills. Right. What do I have to teach what I need to be teaching and for them to learn from it. And then we kind of go to the idea of how then do we personalize that in that classroom to make it fit our students and what our goal is, and then we kind of go from there with it.
It should be understood that equipment it's okay to write a grant for equipment, but just be sure that when you're writing your grant that you help clarify how it will enhance the learning process, how that particular piece of equipment is needed to meet the goals of your grant.
On the grant committee, we all understand that technology is a huge focus. We know that you need it in your classrooms to be successful. We know that it's the future. We know it's how these kids learn. We also know that CISD can only provide so much right now. So we want, as an education foundation, to help you fund these technology areas. The question or the concern that we have is when we get a grant that just says I need 6 iPads, we know that iPads are great, but how are you going to use iPads creatively with innovation in your classroom for your kids? So what we want to see in that grant is more than 2 or 3 sentences. We want you to really elaborate on how you're going to use those iPads or the iPod Touches or anything that you're looking for, how you're going to use them throughout the year for generations to come, how many kids are going to be involved with it, how creative you can be with it to enhance their learning experience. And so ask us for it, but just be a little, give us more detail on what you can do, and also to remember that these are innovative teaching grants. So a lot of times when we read those grants, they just look like a canned program, to where we need to know what you're going to do with them to really excel your kids.
Next, look at the purpose of your grant. What are you trying to accomplish? Consider who's going to be involved. The Education Foundations typically sets guidelines that an individual can apply for up to $5,000 and a team may apply for up to $7,500. Think about the kinds of resources you need and the costs involved. Are there already resources on your campus that can be used for the grant?
The grant committee looks to meet the needs of the community. With that said, there are varying needs in the community. In particular, I like to look for areas that aren't already supported by the budgets, and a need that will be unfulfilled if the Education Foundation didn't exist.
Here are a few examples of items funded by the Education Foundation. The Education Foundation typically prefers to fund items that can be used for several years. However, if grants are truly creative and innovative, they will consider funding items that may need to be renewed year after year. Keep this in mind, as you will have to apply for the grant each year to get additional funding.
Sports. I was on the original bylaw committee, and sports, because they have other sources and other supporters, have traditionally been left out. Initially, we ruled out field trips, but several things have come up over the years that have made us change our mind on that. One, taking our deaf ed kids to the Austin School of the Deaf, and that was such a huge success and so meaningful that sort of broke down the barrier. And this year, for the first time, we took all of our 6th graders to the Perot Museum in Dallas. That's an hour away, and simply cannot have our kids not that have opportunity. But in general, a field trip has to be pretty specific. It can't be go to the park and play for the afternoon. I mean, that's a silly example. But we sort of, hopefully we've grown over the 12 years and have looked at this a little differently.
The grant committee tends to shy away from areas that are already being funded through the budget or through equipment that really can't be explained or justified through the expense of the foundation.
I agree with Jane on looking at, I think on the field trips, I look for things when I'm looking at these grants that students will benefit from academically in learning, that they'll be learning field trips, not that they will be fun in the learning process, but not just the idea of going somewhere and just having fun. Yeah. But the idea that it's going to have some impact on them in the future and in their studies and later on in life. And I think the idea of looking at grants that will touch upon a lot of students, that will be long-term, and as opposed to maybe looking at something that would be a short-term usage, or that all students or a very limited number of students would get an impact from. And I think there are some that will be great grants that maybe we look at individually that are for a small group of students in a particular area, but for the most part looking at something that from year to year can be used with those students over and over, and that more than just 100 students will benefit, but maybe 400 or 500 will benefit from those things.
When writing the grant, please consider that the Education Foundation Grant Committee consists of business professionals from the community. These are volunteers who've come in to review these grants blindly, and they don't always understand all of the acronyms that come from the education field. So when writing, it's important to choose the right words. Please write it as if you're trying to explain the grant to your next-door neighbor or someone who's not necessarily familiar with the education field.
The grant committee is made up of all the facets of this community. We have former board members, former trustees at sometimes. We have community members, former teachers, business leaders, just really from all areas of the community. The main thing I would say is that most of them, though, do not have an education background. So the one thing that is really important to us when we view the grants is that you write the grants in a way that those of us that are not in the education field can understand it. The education field is so different than the business world. So even just myself being on the board of trustees for 6 years, it's still such a learning process to me since I'm not in the education world. So the acronyms and the TEKS and all the different requirements that you as a teacher have, we don't know that. So you need to write this as though someone that knows nothing about the education field understands and wants to give to the idea that you have.
To help you write a successful grant, ask someone else to read your proposal. Is it clear and persuasive? Make sure your proposal is tied to your instruction in the TEKS, and also be sure to spell check and proof your work. The criteria is listed. We do give a handout that provides what the Education Foundation Grant Committee uses to score the grants. Please do not use your campus name in the narrative. The grants are reviewed blindly. That means the grant committee does not know which campus they come from. They may have an idea of the general grade level if it's K through 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th through 12th, but they're unaware of which campus or which teachers are writing the grant.
Well, when we get the grants, we have no idea who they've come from, the campus. A lot of times we can figure out grade level, of course, but we don't know much about where it's coming from at all. So it's completely blind to us when we get it.
When developing your timeline, work backward from the due date. The Education Foundation typically awards grants at convocation in August. At that time, the funds will be available for you to purchase and start using your grants immediately in the fall.
We like adequate information. We like to touch large numbers of students. We like reusability. Is that a word? I guess. If it is equipment, so it's not used up in 1 year. So certainly there's some specific criteria that we do look at in the grant.
Please tie your grant into the district or campus's strategic plan and TEKS.
While we encourage teachers to try to reach a broad number of students, I don't want to discourage teachers either who have a special needs group. And special needs doesn't always mean the lowest level. It can also mean the highest level of students or those in the middle. Just be sure that you explain why your request fills a void that isn't already met by some other fund or the budget.
When CEF initiated their grant program, they were innovative teaching grants. Innovation and creativeness are the two things that the foundation looks for the most when reviewing grants. They want a unique way of accomplishing a goal or addressing a need or problem in the classroom.
I have been on the grant committee since its inception, so I've seen them all. And something that was innovative 10 or 11 years ago can still be innovative and still be creative. And if it's a successful grant and you have the data to back it up and you can show what a difference it's made in the kids' lives and your lives, we want to fund that again. We want to be able to go even further on that grant. If there's something that you have that worked and you did it before, let's bring it into the next century. You know, let's see how we can go further with it, how we can advance it and make it even better, and let's fund it again.
The objective on the application must be measurable. That means that there must be some type of data in there that can be measured through surveys, feedback, responses, test scores, or other statistics. Showing an increase in academic performance is also great, as well as attendance. Keep in mind that something as small as a 5% increase can be huge, and don't be afraid to take risks.
The Education Foundation was formed not to add to existing funds already in the budget, but to enhance areas that would be unmet otherwise.
Be sure to include your budget page with your application and double check the numbers. Please show if you've requested any discounts or if you have any other sources to help you with grant funding. Also, please include any shipping charges you may have on your budget page. Please note that anything you purchase with this grant will be considered tax exempt, and the Education Foundation can provide you with the tax exempt form.
And, first of all, check the campus for the availability of the equipment, or if there's potential for class sharing and that sort of thing. From there, go to the administration. Because I know we've referred a number of grants to our technology people, and they are able to get them. So we certainly don't want to pay for something that is otherwise available through state funds or special education funds, or I don't know what they may all be. But
when preparing your budget, be sure to get accurate prices. Talk with vendors about education discounts, as catalog prices are not always the prices that you will be charged. For large orders, please ask for discounts as well. Don't forget about shipping costs, and be specific on your budget forms.
Individual can apply for up to $5,000 and a group or teams up to $7,500 for the grant. Those are numbers that we use as standards, but obviously if there's a grant that goes beyond that we think is a great, wonderful thing for our students, we can look at that individually and see how it impacts the number of students in making those decisions.
This year's deadline for grant applications is Tuesday, April 4th, 2014 by 4 p.m. For the first time, the grant application is actually online and can be found at CorsicanaEF.org.
the state is pushing science, technology, what's the third? Engineering and so forth. And I'm not huge on standardized tests, but it's the here and we need to deal with it. And if there are things at those specific areas that are being emphasized, we probably look harder at that.
Right.
I said, we say we stay away from athletics. That doesn't mean PE things at lower levels. We've got this problem with childhood obesity. And if there's some kind of almost playthings that an elementary school can use, we will look at that. What I think people are trying to stay away from is what we would consider the sort of upper level, publicly available sports.
And I think we want to look at those things that help to strengthen our curriculum, that state standards. We all have outcomes and assessment that we have to do, and these grants that can help make those things fun in learning those things, whether it's with certain items that you have or going to certain places, that will just enhance and help those outcomes be very successful as we do assessment.
So what happens once you submit your grant? Grants are awarded usually at convocation each year. If you're asked to resubmit a grant, there will be reasons provided. Maybe it's because there was a lack of funding for the year, maybe the timing isn't right, or maybe there's other resources within the district. If your grant is not awarded, the Education Foundation will provide you with a letter that includes comments and suggestions from the grant committee.
I think that it's important that no one get discouraged when they receive their grant back and it's only partially funded or a resubmission. The resubmissions we take very seriously, and we like those. We just need more information. Most of the time with resubmissions, there's just not enough detail in there for us to know how it's going to benefit the kids and how our money is going to be best spent. So if you can be, the more detailed the better, and also maybe how you can make it even more innovative or more creative. And a lot of times we see the need for these programs, but we can't fund it at the level that you're asking for it to be funded. So don't get discouraged when we fund it at half the level, so that we can see how successful it is. Because if it's successful and you've got the data to back it up, come back to us and we're willing to fund it the rest of the way or even more.
Once a grant is awarded, we do ask all of our grant recipients to submit an annual survey. This gives us information as to how the grant is going and provides us with data and statistics on whether the grant is successful. We also really like to see grant winners report at a foundation board meeting or a school board meeting, and we really like to film grants in action for video for things like our gala and cast. Some helpful sources as you write your grant. Please look at the Education Foundation website. Feel free to talk with other grant winners, as well as to the Education Foundation, or please call Kristen Zastapel to assist you with your grant.
Somehow, and I don't even remember when it first crossed my mind, just reading about the Perot Museum and talking to people who have been there. And sadly, every parent is not going to be able to take their child individually to the Perot Museum. And so I sat down, talked to Charlie, and of course he thinks here's another one of Jane's goofy ideas. But I said, what I want to do is give a significant amount, but say that it has to be spread out over a time period. So starting with that, really not that significant amount of money, that maybe that will encourage it to be an ongoing. Well, it apparently ended up not nearly as expensive by some very creative things that the school did in terms of providing lunches. And I mean, I feel very good that I think it will be an ongoing, and an hour away we simply are goofy not to see.
Really, it's interesting when you read it, the things that catch my eye may not catch someone else's, but what seems to catch mine is something that I haven't seen before. If it's a brand new program or something, I particularly love grants that focus on so many different curriculums and so many different areas of focus. I love the ones that they bring in PE along with social studies and fine arts and English, and so we love the ones that combine where it's really a school effort more than an individual classroom effort, because we feel like our money is going further and we can reach more kids. Those would be the ones that just catch my eye immediately. And I think that with a good group on that committee, everybody is going to have something that they love. So for me, instance, anything fine arts is going to be the first thing that catches my eye. The things that we really don't like, I will have to say, or we have to really discuss back and forth and sometimes argue back and forth. Right off the top, we usually do not like an athletic or a field trip grant. So we really have to read those further to see what you're doing with those. Some of my favorite grants have ended up being field trip grants, but at a first glance, I thought they're just asking for money to go do something. But once I got into it and could see how the English department and the fine arts department and the PE department and the social studies department were all working together to create this grant that was going to benefit so many children over a long period of time, and how they were going to use the field trip back in the classroom along with reaching out to the community, those are the ones that we think, okay, this is worth the field trip money, because it encompasses so much more than just a bus ride to a location.